train track vibes, third rail hell, turnstile skipping, bums on the benches, Henny on the 7 by the middle car pissing, rats in the tunnels, subway suicide, train track vibes, third rail hell, turnstile skipping, bums on the benches, Henny on the 7 by the middle car pissing, rats in the tunnels, subway suicide, train track vibes, third rail hell, subway suicide. Headless horseman on the iron horse, open wounds on my wrist, deep cuts from the iron cross. Bondage in the back, God's hands try to tie them off. Sofa danger close, mic wars, fighting force. Bonded through a higher form, birthed by the virus with the DNA of dinosaurs. Then resurrected as a vinyl store. Look what the lions brought, blood from the dinosaurs, heads on the flying source. When it's near the end, you be as shook as the Mayans thought. Death on the F, I made a transfer to the firing squad, riot squad. Signing off as the tyrant boss, moving train. Grim Reapers on his final course, hands crossed. See the evil in this rap form, at Penn Station pushing people off the platform. Yeah, I went from cyanide to Tylenol. Life is hard, living life through the eyes of God. Train track vibes, third rail hell, turnstile skipping, bums on the benches, Henny on the 7 by the middle car pissing, rats in the tunnel, subway suicide, train track vibes, third rail hell, turnstile skipping, bums on the benches, Henny on the 7 by the middle car pissing, rats in the tunnel, subway suicide.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
The next stop is 103rd Street, Corona Plaza.
Take the 7 train on 42nd. Take a look back, jump on the tracks and then ascend to heaven. New York will be the final place I rest in. Scatter my ashes on the streets and then receive my blessings. The Holy Ghost until my resurrection. But holy smokes, the fucking kid's impressive. A line of coke whenever F is in the session. Queens Boulevard cries with the stains of my memories. Secondhand scenery, thinking about my felonies. Nasty immigrant, Inca child from the motherland. 5th floor brother man, street corner hustle man. The guy your parents warned about, Berkowitz, son of Sam. Dirt bag, gutter trash, low life gun in hand. Ain't afraid of dying, so what's left? Nothing. Damn, rulers back, nigga. Stop lying. You don't pop iron, you run the pops crying. I stand proud, blunt in my mouth like Snoop Lion.
Keep the train track vibes, third rail hell, turnstile skipping, bums on the benches, Henny on the 7 by the middle car pissing, rats in the tunnels, subway suicide, train track vibes, third rail hell, turnstile skipping, bums on the benches, Henny on the 7 by the middle car pissing, rats in the tunnels, subway suicide, train track vibes, third rail hell, subway suicide.
Yeah.
I am here in San Francisco with Corinne Johansson, founder and executive director of All Education Matters. And I guess it was about a month ago, Corinne was on my radio show talking about student debt, and it's great to meet you in person, Corinne.
You too.
So, it was shocking to me, reading your blog and then having you on the show, is hearing you talk about students who are swimming in so much debt that they're actually contemplating suicide.
Yeah, it's, as I was saying to you earlier, I'm not an interventionist, obviously. I'm just clearly not a therapist. And I'm an advocate for people with student loan debt, but that's quite different. And so but the outreach is important. And so what I've done is every time I write about it, I always put the National Suicide Hotline on every piece. I don't do images that trigger. And I have to admit, there was one way back 2 years ago that I did. It was a painting. It's an impressionist painting. But I realized that that's just not healthy. I mean, you have to be really careful as a journalist when you're writing about this. So I always have just the numbers for suicide prevention. And what's terrible, though, is, just last week I got this comment on my blog, because I I moderate them. And this person was admitting that they had just been sitting in their car in their garage.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And they said, but then I thought about my poor spouse.
You know, the other thing that killed me about this is we've got student debt just hit the $1 trillion mark. It's now more than credit card debt.
Right.
Why isn't this suicide angle getting more attention?
Well, I mean, I think and when it comes to journalism, it's people want to have the statistics on it. And right now, I think with the CDC, the most recent in terms of just general suicides across the country and how they break it down, male, female, et cetera, ages, is I think the most recent is 2008, if memory serves me. We're 2012. And granted, it takes time to collect the data.
Right.
But, and the suicide community is really sort of, I don't want to say defensive, but they worry too about getting away from sort of other causes. And because depression obviously is a huge factor. But when you think about it sociologically, even just the ideation, and not even going through with it, I think is significant because it shows the level of where, the emotional level where these people are.
Right.
And I think that's really important to talk about.
Exactly. Now, you've done quite a few interviews with the national media. Do they ask you about these issues? Do they ask you maybe to put them in touch with someone?
No.
Really?
There was one woman from a major outlet that did several years ago, but this again went back to needing statistics because there are plenty. I think there would be people who'd be willing to share. I've found some of them who are willing to share, and I've read. I know that some of them by name, of course, because a lot of them come flooding in anonymously, and I that might raise questions about, well, is it really, what about the validity of that? But I mean, when you read these posts, and I actually was interviewed on a local television show, I will have to say, in New York when I was at Occupy New York, and I read these letters, these notes out loud, and these are really, these are really coming from the heart, and it's just, you feel this strange isolation and yet connection to the people,
right?
But I feel helpless, and it's also because it's such an unnecessary problem, ultimately.
Well, talk more about that. I mean, if people, when you talk about things like debt or mortgages, there's that line, well, they signed the dotted line,
Right.
they asked for it. So how do you respond to that?
Well, the thing I always say is, well, first of all, I know thousands of debtors now, and these are people who want to make good on their payments. They really do, but if you are deciding whether or not to have to pay for medical bills, which I know people, or your groceries for your kids, you're probably going to choose those over your student loans, despite the consequences. And so we know that unemployment is devastating here. I mean, this is a jobs problem to a degree, but it's also the fact that the way we finance education.
Right.
And it's really, Uncle Sam is to blame. I mean, the private loans are a big problem too, but they are the biggest lender. And then the Department of Education has these collectors that are on these great contracts that just try to squeeze as much out as they can.
So they're actually going after these college grads big time.
Aggressively. They track down their uncles, their aunts. I know people who fled the country, and the one guy was called in Canada, and he said, "Have you heard of this?" And I said, "Yeah, I just heard from a guy in Spain. They were calling his work at Spain."
Well, when you were on my show, we had an email from a woman in Canada.
That's right.
We had so many emails.
And she'd been suicidal, she told us.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'll put the link on that show right under this video. What needs to be done about this? President Obama was talking regularly about pressuring Congress not to double the rates of just one loan, and they wouldn't even debate that.
Yeah, and that is important. 7.4 million people would be affected, students.
Right.
And as Pamela Brown, who was from the Occupy Student Debt Campaign, said, here the president's been going all over the country for that one particular issue, and as you said, they came out agreeing. John Boehner did even, but then they want to take money out of funds that are related to, as they call it, Obamacare, the health system, that would hurt women. And I think it was pre-screening for cancer.
Right.
That's how they were going to negotiate. And they've been doing that. I mean, look at the debt ceiling. Look at what they did to us. They are, the GOP, as, what's his name, Max Ornstein, at the American Enterprise Institute just wrote this great piece. It's co-authored. I can't remember the other.
Someone from Brookings, I think.
Yes, and the GOP is the problem, and he is absolutely right. And reporters are failing to call these people out on the facts.
And this is the American Enterprise Institute.
I know this is sort of the beacon of promoting free market ideology, and this guy is saying the GOP and their plans are just they're harmful to the American people.
So let's talk about solutions. What could the government do right now to deal with this problem?
Well, I think the government at this point is realizing that they're going to have to deal with it in some form of absorption. There's also been a bill introduced on the House side that has 1% support. Unfortunately, it's reformist. It's Rep. Hanson Clark. It's the student loan forgiveness bill, and I praise it, and I've met with people in his office. I'm glad that he's out there because he gets to have time on the floor to talk about this problem. But when you look at it closely, and I've talked to people who are sort of experts as well, the higher education analysts, they've said that it's kind of more of a form like the income-based repayment program. It's a quicker time of forgiveness. So you're still repaying it, and that's not a problem. But I don't think that it's not significant enough.
Right.
It just isn't significant enough.
Well, and let's remind people the bank's got 0 interest loans.
Right.
What's the average interest rate for students right now?
It varies, but the private loans can be as high as they can fluctuate. We'll be conservative, 3 to 10% or more, and there's no you might have a grace period or forbearance with private loans for 3 to 6 months. It depends on all the lender. And then it's just too bad. That's it. At least with the federal government, they do offer forbearance and economic hardship. Yet, at the same time, when you do that, you're still accruing interest. So, this one guy I know, he borrowed $69,000 in 1998, I believe, and he's defaulted, and he now owes $320,000.
Wow.
And by the time he retires, he will owe $1.5 million to the federal government. That's just cruel. And the guy lives in a basement with his parents. It's about dignity too. We talk often. I kind of consider him a colleague, and I say, this is a systemic problem. So, with solutions, one thing I know is Christine Pelosi. She's an author.
We have about a minute left.
Okay, she made a suggestion that like a work project, WPA, and in something that's fair, but get people back to work and offer some kind of let's just say loan forgiveness for them to go build bridges and give back to communities and all sorts of ways. Get them to teaching. Because the forgiveness programs are clearly not working if we're at $1 trillion.
Right.
Because the government can come back and say, we do have forgiveness programs, but the red tape for these programs are just ridiculous.
Well, I'll put your blog under this video, and I encourage you to check it out and share it with friends, because Corinne Johansson is following this very closely. And also, you're working on a piece about the suicides, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Corinne Johansson, it's so horrible. Founder and executive director of All Education Matters. We're here in San Francisco. Thanks, Corinne.
Thanks.